comes time in every artist's life, the life of every art project, where you've managed to accumulate so much clutter that it just becomes obnoxious to continue working. So at this point, I'm going to clean. And since I'm trying to keep an accurate count, an accurate count, I'm gonna just let the timer run while I clean, and that's just gonna be part of the process. So that's right, you're seeing it all, start to finish, except for the very start and the very finish. Alright, here we go. Let's see how fast I can do this.
Wow, he's starting to actually look like a Colossus.
So, we got this guy, his body blocked out, his body and head blocked out. Sprayed him down with primer. So now I'm looking at him more holistically, and I'm seeing a couple concerns, things I want to adjust a bit. For one thing, he seems to be leaning like the Tower of Pizza. So delicious. He's like this. So I kind of think that I can kind of jack up one side of his pelvis or shave down the other side so that that arm will weigh down, change the center of gravity. So I think that's what I'll start with, and then I'm going to move on to armor bits. I guess a good way to test this would be to just put some shims in there, and or popsicle sticks. Alright, so I got this stuff. I don't know if it's the right stuff. I spend a lot of weekends wandering through Home Depot with kind of a vacant look on my face, or maybe it's more dumbfounded. I just wander up and down the aisles. I have no idea what specifically I'm looking for. I'm just looking for something that will do what I want it to do, and of course try to explain it to a guy in an orange apron that you're making 4-foot tall Shadow of Colossus sculpture armor pieces, and they can't generally point you to the right aisle for that. So this is corrugated plastic, so it's like cardboard, but it's plastic, which is good because for all these armor bits, I'm gonna do a fair bit of sculpting over them with epoxy clay, and I'll need to blend it in and stuff like that. And you can't blend epoxy clay into cardboard and then like sand that and paint. That just won't work out well. So anyway, I'm gonna try this stuff. Basically, from these patterns, I'm looking at these patterns and saying, okay, how does this match the concept and or the actual model, and how does it not? Like, for instance, this little piece here is kind of pointing out, and really it should be pointing almost at a 90-degree angle off of the skin, so I have to make a more curved piece. You just watch what I do. You'll see what I do. And it won't be the right thing, but then I'll learn from that and I'll do a more right thing. And then watch me then. Okay, plan B. So what I realized was that these little armor bits are way more organic than I thought they were. I thought they were mostly planes and angles, like the face. The more I'm trying to reproduce them with flat things, the more frustrating it's becoming. So instead, I'm going to block them out just like I did with the rest of the body, and then I'll go through and detail them with the more heavy, expensive clay. Right now I'm using the Celu clay just to get the basic shapes in. Okay, well, let's check out this unpleasantness. I sculpted these guys on here, and I took them off about a day after I put the aluminum foil over the shoulders. I sculpted these guys on, took them off, took them inside to dry, because leaving them in the garage when it's cold and damp, they get moldy. And it turns out, as you can see here, it doesn't fit anymore unless I move it way down here where it doesn't belong, and I don't want to put it where it doesn't belong. So this one seems a little better. I think it's almost in the right place, but I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring out how I'm gonna go about all this armor stuff. I mean, if I didn't care about weight and I didn't care about money, I would sculpt it all out of epoxy clay. And I may end up having to do that and just suffer the consequences, whatever they may be. I'm gonna try one more thing. I mixed up another batch of the old Celu clay, and I mean, specifically there's some of his armor that's very bulky, right? Like his thigh armor has all these crazy chunks and spikes and stuff. yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty much just winging it right now, in case you hadn't noticed. I've actually been winging it all along. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to do exactly what I did that failed before, except this time I'm going to leave it on there, see what happens. So by exactly I mean different, but it's funnier to say exactly. And the whole point of doing this is to be funny. I'm starting to form a theory here, which is that I'm going to be applying thin slabs of this stuff over the foil, and then I will have those as removable platforms on which to build the rest of the army, the chunky armor bits. And that's my theory, and let's see if it works. I'm going to find out in a couple days. You're going to find out in like 2 minutes maybe? You're so lucky. Two things. So one is, you may notice that these are protruding further than they do in the actual creature. The reason is because I'm anticipating that the fur is going to stand a good inch off of the body, so they're going to need to stick out further. And part two of this is that I'm taking them off because I don't have reference with me. I don't have my laptop out here, and I'm probably going to put them in stupid places and make them the wrong sizes anyway. I hope you learned a valuable lesson. Woo! Well, welcome back. Welcome back, myself. I've been gone for 2.5 months now. Things have been crazy at work, so I'm back at it though. That's the important part. Sometimes life happens, but just get back on that treadmill. Okay, so where I left off was kind of floundering, and I've thought about it a little bit, and I think I know why. The reason I'm floundering is because, for two reasons. One is because of fear. I'm floundering in fear, really. I'm looking at the armor bits that I've got to build on this guy, and they are incredibly intricate, incredibly complicated, and I was trying to come up with a solution that was both cheap and lightweight, because I know weight is going to be an issue for this guy, and well, who wants to spend a bunch of extra money if you don't have to? So yeah, I was trying to make these kind of paper guides and then build up with this celluclay, which is nice and cheap and lightweight. And I think the conclusion I've come to is that it's just not the right material for the job. So when you run into a problem of not using the right material for the job, you just kind of have to scrap what you've been doing and start over again. So I guess that's the nice thing about a nice long break, is it's not totally emotionally defeating to start over a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just go straight to using the epoxy sculpt. That's what I was going to use, just like as a thin skin over it, but instead I'm just going to build it straight up out of that stuff. I'm going to be rather than putting a big blob over it and trying to get the shape worked out, the first way I'm going to approach this is trying to make the little bits and pieces. For example, on his foot here, you can see this repeating pattern where it's basically the same design repeated, I don't know, it looks like 12 times or something like that. So I'm going to try to make one of those pieces. I'll make a mold of that, and then I'll press in as many pieces as I need, and I'll try to progress that way. We'll see how that works. The disadvantage to that is that sometimes you could end up with wrong proportions. You know, oh, I made it 20% too wide, and so now there's way fewer pieces than there should be, something like that. I think that's kind of where the fear comes in, is like, oh no, if I do that, then I have to go back and redo the mold, and I have to, so it's just, you just have to be brave, and you just have to do it, and you have to accept that, you know what, I'm gonna have to redo some stuff. That's not the big deal. It's just a matter of practice. And really, always the second time you do something, you're gonna be better at it anyway. So that's the way to look on the bright side. So with that said, I guess I'll start with the foot. Why not? Start at the bottom, work my way up. So here's a little trick that I do is when I'm gonna make something, for example, I'm making the little, I should really come up with a name for this, hoof plate. That's what this is. This is officially a hoof plate that I'm making. So when I make a hoof plate, for example, I'll take the material that I'm going to be using and split off it into about 2/3 and 1/3. I put the 1/3 side aside, and then I do my blocking out with the 2/3 of the material, making sure it's right and everything. But that way, I'm never stuck in a pinch where I'm sculpting it, it fits perfect, it's right, and then, oh crap, I need to add something and I don't have anything to add. So I've got that thing to the side. Because this stuff it took me like 3 minutes to mix it. So that's just kind of a waste of time to sit there. Oh, I have to add this tiny little thing. Let me spend another 3 minutes kneading this stuff. Here's a little thing I want to talk about real quick. So this line right here, I drew a little too wide. I shouldn't say draw, because I explicitly told you not to draw on the clay. Point being that the line is too far over. With this particular material, unlike Super Sculpey, because it's a multi-stage process to get your final piece that you're trying to do, rather than trying to rub this line out by smushing it around, I'll just let it sit, let it dry, and then when I go in for my second pass where I'm adding more details and stuff, I'll fill it in at that point. That way it keeps everything, the keeps the basic shape and proportions the same. Whereas if you try smushing stuff around, a lot of times you'll distort the overall thing. So just another little pro tip, number 900,767,000 million billion. Okay, these guys have gone through stage 1, and now I'm going to start doing stage 3. I'm going to skip 2, because that would take too long. Pro tip, always skip tip 2. Take 2? To step 2. Wait. Oh yeah. Never mind. Alright, I did a quick little inventory of the various parts that I'm making molds for. This is all going to come together in a couple minutes. You'll see how it's kind of hard to explain right now, but essentially the parts that are tiled, I'm going to be making stamps out of and then reproducing. One of the things to keep in mind when you're making a stamp is to not have like very harsh edges. I guess you could say if this was like a profile of an edge, like the edge of this thing here, you would want it to be bend out a little like that, not be flat down, so that when you press the mold stuff into it, you can pull it out without it getting caught up on flat edges or underhangs and stuff like that. So on this guy here, you can see it's there's actually some overhangs and some very steep walls there. So I'm taking a tiny bit of clay and working it in. Oops. And working it into that little edge to make sure that it'll be a good mold. Oh yeah, I forgot. I was initially talking about my inventory. So I went through all the various parts, and using a highlighter I kind of surrounded a thing, circled thing, and gave it a name. That way I can, when I have 20 of these random little parts floating around, I'm like, what is this? I can be, oh yeah, this was on the foot. So this is F2, and this is F1. F stands for foot. And yeah, so just trying to stay organized because there's so many of these pieces, and I've got so many that are in various stages of development, which is, again, it's just the way this medium works. You kind of build it up by layers, and so some, like for instance, this is going to require several more layers before it's done. This only has maybe one before this one's done. So that's, I'm trying to stay organized. That's my point. Right here is a really good example of an overhang. If you put your tool straight down, you can see there's room in there where the clay would catch when you stick it in. So I feel like I maybe did something a little dumb with these pieces. These are these, they're kind of like weird crenellations that are all over his legs. And the pattern on them is very regular. It's like a long and a short and a long and a short. So I thought I could get away with just kind of eyeballing it. And here's the wonky thing, right? Is that when they build this on the computer, they lay out what's called UVs. And so they take a flat texture, it's like a piece of paper with printing on it, right? And they're putting it over all these bendy, curvy surfaces. That's what your UVs are on a 3D model. And you can squash and stretch them. So in reality, what's on the model is not a perfectly proportioned set of lines. They're squashing and stretching to accommodate the model. So I kind of felt like, well, I'll just kind of eyeball it and get it in there, because on the model they're not perfect anyway. Now I just feel like maybe I'm going a little too organic, so I'm gonna revisit these guys. I'm not sure how yet. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. Okay, I thought about it. This is what I'm going to do. I am going to make a stamp that is one little piece of these, and then I'm going to I think I'm just going to have to start over on these. But yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll make a stamp that is two of these lines, and so because it's almost like piano keys in a way, and so I'll just do like a white and a black key, white and a black key, white and a... Just watch, you'll get it, all right? Just calm down, you'll get it. We'll figure this out together. Alrighty, I was just doing a little bit of grinding on these guys. One thing that was annoying me was I was mixing this stuff, I was using some amount of it, and then I wasn't finding anything to do with a leftover little chunk, and I don't know, I don't like wasting things. I just love Mother Gaia so much. Or maybe it's the money, it's one of those two things. So, the thing that I did, the reason that I ground these little horns down that I've had on their kind of placeholder for a while is so that when I have extra stuff I could smear it on here, and eventually these will be covered in epoxy sculpt, and that's why. Did I say that's why? That's why. Okay, back to work. Alright, I'm going to talk about molds a little bit. So, I just used this stuff. This is amazing mold putty. I get it at Michael's. Lots of craft stores have it. It's not very economical because it comes in just these little tubes, and I want to say it's like $20 right now. I usually wait till they send out their 50% off coupons and stock up. However, I think I've used them all recently, so I'm almost out. I'm going to have to get some more. There are other methods for making molds. Oh, let me show you the other thing I was doing when I was putting the clay on this, guys. I was using one of these. Now, I made this texture by sculpting it, the positive in Sculpey or something, and then I mixed that together, pressed it on, pulled it off, and now I have this little texture stamp, which is essentially what we were doing with these armor detail parts. So as you can see, it sets up in a couple minutes, which is a really nice thing about this particular mold. It's a little tricky. Any mold where you have to push the material into all the little nooks and crannies will invariably miss some from time to time. Trimming off the excess edges here. Okay, so you can see there's the positive, here's the negative, and now I can take any material, like I could use clay, I could use an epoxy sculpt, I could use Sculpey, I could even pour in a 2-part resin and then make as many copies of this as needed. If you look at his feet, sure, buried somewhere around here. So this is going to be this part, and it continues around the edge. Now, like I was talking about UVs, how they get squashed and pinched and stuff, this is a perfect example. Up here it's kind of the full width, and then it pinches as it goes back. So I was toying around with the idea of making a mold out of really soft silicone and actually just like physically pinching it down and then pouring plaster in there. I think I have a better idea, we'll see, which is essentially to use the epoxy sculpt, push it in the mold, pull it out while it's still malleable, and then basically slice it in half, slice a little wedge out of it. You'll see. We'll see if it works. Who knows? Other mold stuff. So here's some other options. This stuff is from Smooth On, and it's basically like this stuff, but you can get it in larger quantities, so it's a little cheaper that way. And then there's this stuff, Mold Builder. You could also find this at most craft stores, and it's just a liquid latex. You kind of brush it on with a chip brush, and it's incredibly tedious to do because you're basically building up like almost microscopic layers at a time. You have to wait for one to dry, like, I don't know, I want to say 10 minutes to half an hour, and then you do the next one. I've done molds with this stuff where I've literally spent days making a single mold, and it was ridiculous. So if you want this free sample, I'll mail it to you. I'm just kidding, I won't mail it to you. It would cost more to ship than it would to buy it. Okay, so here we go. Let's make some more molds. Well, actually, first let's go ahead and see how this comes out. As a general rule, my pro tip number 781 is to take one element that you're going to be doing a lot, for instance, these little stampy guys, and go as far through the process as you can with one before you do what I've been doing, which is making a whole bunch of these things, and then you find out 90% of the way through, oh wait, this won't work for whatever random reason. So don't do what I'm doing, do what I'm saying. And here we go. So this is the next step in the process, I would be making lots of copies of this guy. So here you see a pretty accurate representation. And while the clay is still soft, I can do that little wedging action to it. Can mess around with squashing and stretching different parts of it. Alright, so I think this looks fairly promising, and, well, just watch me as I go and we'll find out if it's less promising than I thought. Oh, stop, don't go anywhere, I'm not fast forwarding yet. I have something else to talk about. This is another kind of mold that I make. So there's soft molds and there's rigid molds, and these are more like, or I guess you could call them stamps. So over the years, I've been making lots of these things for a variety of projects, and you never know when, you know, I made this angel, right, with these angel wings, and these are the little feathers that I made. And then natural things, like I got this at a shop at the beach, right? It's some kind of antediluvian horror of some sort, shrunken down. Starfish. Right, here's an interesting texture I got just from taking Super Sculpty Firm when it was kind of cold and tearing it apart. And I was getting these really interesting, it seemed to me almost like, like flint or something. That's so you can make some interesting rock textures with that, is my point. See, here's the original texture that I made out of Sculpey, and I squished that stuff on it. There you go. This one's really good for knuckles. Just press it across like that. This is the wing for that fairy back there. Here's one that I use for snake scales. You take it and roll it across. And ended up with, let's see, I think, was it for this guy? No? Oh, some snake at some point. I'm sure I used this. I had every intention of using it. Another one. So anyway, you're not here to look at all my awesome textures. But look how awesome that one is. It's so awesome. Okay. Here's the snake one. Look at this. Looks kind of like a tank or a tire tread, right? See, that's what I used to make a stamp, and then I go around on that to get those cool textures. I like textures, in case you didn't know. Textures are fun. And the point that I was trying to make was that I made this as a, see, I made this little guy so that I can make this little guy. Shave off some of these edges. So that, and hopefully you will see this in a matter of moments of your time, it's still going to be quite a few hours of my time. Right, so areas, we've got all these border areas, and that's essentially what I'm going to do, is I'm going to press that, I'm going to make a strip of clay and I'm going to press it over. That's the idea, we'll see. I'll probably also make a soft mold of this so that I can pour liquid plastic in there, and then I can have lots of little strips to play with.